Today we are joined by one of the leading politicians in Israel, some betting even a future prime minister. I'm very happy to welcome back to the Spin Room former Education Minister and Interior Minister Gideon of the ruling Likud party. Gideon, thank you very much for coming back to the show.
Hello, Ami. Great to be here again.
So let's start with some serious topics, of course. Many in Israel and abroad are concerned of the stalled peace process with the Palestinians and especially the recent wave of violence on the Gaza border. How do you see the situation now?
First of all, there are two different branches, the Palestinian Authority and Hamas in Gaza. With regard to Hamas in Gaza, they tried obsessively for 1 month. After we blocked different attempts, mainly they tried to do by digging tunnels to our territory. And they tried a different strategy with causing provocations and terror actions on our borders, trying to enter to our territory, which, as you know, a few miles from there, not few miles, less than 1 mile.
That's right.
You have their communities and villages and kibbutzim. So it is, of course, totally unacceptable, and the IDF very decisively broke these attempts, and I think the policy was correct. I backed the government, I backed the IDF at the time, and they stopped it for a while.
Right.
With regard to the Palestinian Authority, we face some different problems. They don't want to come back to negotiations. They didn't have an internal elections there for 13 years.
Yeah.
And I think it influenced the level of things that leadership can do in terms of legitimacy.
We're going to talk about Mahmoud Abbas in just a minute, but I want to still focus a bit on Gaza and the deaths that happened on Gaza, specifically on May 14th, about over 60 people that were killed. Why do you think international media adopted the Palestinian narrative of the strong military shooting at unarmed protesters?
It is very hard to explain when you have casualties on one side and no casualties on the other side.
A lot of casualties.
I can tell you that if the situation was more balanced, so to speak, in terms of casualties, we would have gained more balanced media. But I prefer to have worst medias with these results. The thing is that it is totally the opposite. I mean, the one that wanted a high number of casualties there was the Hamas. Our soldiers did their utmost in order to do things until the minute they didn't have any choice. That someone was trying to do some terror action or was on the border itself, not to shoot, or to shoot not in order to kill, but those who initiated that from the beginning and tried very hard to have casualties for their own people are the Hamas leadership. I hope that eventually the citizens of Gaza will understand after more than a decade that Hamas rules Gaza and the standard of living there is just getting lower and lower. They don't care about welfare, they don't care about education, they don't care about health. They care only to initiate hostilities and terror against Israel.
It's a problem for Israel as well, wouldn't you agree? The humanitarian crisis
It is truly a problem, and we try to do our utmost in order to make it more easier.
Is Israel doing enough?
But what can you do when the Palestinians are those who are burning infrastructure installations like gas or something that leads things for their own people? I mean, it's a behavior that we totally don't control.
Okay.
So I hope that we will have an atmosphere when we can calm down the situation. Both sides, I mean, would you
support a truce? There are some reports about a hudna, a long-term truce. Would you support that with Hamas?
Depends what's the meaning of hudna. If the hudna is that they can build their military infrastructure, they can bring in more missiles to have more weapons, and all this time we cannot do anything and just wait for the time that they can more successfully attack us,
Okay,
I'm against
all right.
it.
Okay.
I'm against it. But if there will be found a formula how we can reconstruct the Gaza Strip and help with that, and they will demilitarize Gaza Strip, this is great.
Okay.
From the first place, Israel, when left Gaza 13 years ago, until the last centimeter, until the last meter, we wanted to have border of peace. We wanted to have a prosperous Gaza. We didn't want to give them any kind of excuse for the continuation of hostilities,
Okay.
but they didn't took it.
Let's talk about Mahmoud Abbas. He's been sick lately in hospital. He's 82 years old. A few months ago, you said already that his role is already over. Do you look forward to the day that Abbas leaves the stage?
It's not that I'm looking forward, but I don't have any further expectations in terms of doing good for the region, for our relations, for his people from Mahmoud Abbas. I don't know what will happen afterwards. I don't know even if we will have one leader after Mahmoud Abbas. We might see different scenarios. We might see the Palestinian Authority dismantled to various cities and factions. I don't know what will happen on the day after Abbas, but unfortunately, I cannot expect anything good from the leadership of Mr. Abbas.
You recently said it's time to think about new solutions, that the two-state solution is dead. What's your solution?
I support a regional solution. I support a regional solution with the involvement of Jordan. The current two-state slogan keeps an idea of a very small, non-functioning, so-called Palestinian mini-state with no viable economy, with no better future. On the other hand, it risks the security and the demography of the State of Israel. So I think we need a sense of depth in the solution itself. I remind you that the Palestinian residents of Judea and Samaria was until 1988 citizens of Jordan. The one that denied the citizenship of the Palestinian residents of Judea and Samaria unilaterally against the international law was Jordan.
Okay.
So I think we should think about a regional framework. I think in some aspects like economy, tourism, environment, it can be a triangle. Israel, Palestinian.
But I'm trying to understand what it's going to be. Will they have an autonomy? Will they have their own state?
They will have an autonomy, but connected to the Kingdom of Jordan. And
so who do they vote for? Who do they vote for?
They vote, first of all,
for the
they
Jordanian
will vote,
parliament?
First of all, they will vote for their representatives in Ramallah that will continue to manage their life in terms of health, education, municipalities, and so on and so forth.
But they want their own state.
You have here in this, they want a state.
Yeah. Can't they have one? Don't they deserve one?
It's a question we can argue about because they have an they had opportunities. Since 1947, the partition resolution of the UN, until Barak and Ehud Olmert offered them time and again a Palestinian state, they always rejected that because they never wanted to end the conflict with us. So their true ambition is not their own state, is to destroy the state of Israel. But I think, looking reasonably...
in 30 seconds, yes.
Yes, in this region, when we saw so many Arab states dismantled during the last years, the last urgent thing to do is to create a new non-functioning state in the West Bank.
Okay, well, we'll have to see and ask them, I guess, if they agree to that, right?
Everything must be agreed upon by both sides.
All right. Israel announced today it will advance, a proposal next week for the immediate construction of 2,500 new housing units in the West Bank settlements. Does building more in the West Bank bring us closer to solving the conflict?
First of all, it's not the main cause of building. We need to build because we have their communities. We have 500,000 Jews living there. Would you believe that such a big communities will live without any further building?
It's not only natural growth.
I can tell you, babies are born there, and life must continue there. And we are talking about big cities like Ma'ale Adomim that they didn't build during the last years almost.
Do you support settlement construction outside of the bigger cities?
I support settlement constructions everywhere in legal settlements. And there are parameters that were agreed by the Israeli government with the American administration, how we can do it. But it's not in any way hurting the prospects for peace. This will not change anything in terms of living in peace in the future. We live in peace here. We will never stop building in an Arab village and say, don't build more because it will hurt the cause of peace. It's not different. It's not different. It is very reasonable that Jews will live in Judea and Samaria not less than Jews will live in London, in New York, in Los Angeles. It's the cradle of our nation.
Okay. U.S. Ambassador David Friedman said in an interview yesterday that he doesn't think Israel is disappointed from the U.S. decision to pull out of Syria. Do you agree with his assessment? Wouldn't you have hoped for a stronger U.S. effort to stop Iranian entrenchment in Syria?
We cannot run foreign policy of the United States or their military around the world. I would advise to our friends in Washington to help the Kurds also in Syria, because if we are talking about future influence of the United States in the region, you must look for the natural allies of the United States.
But are you worried
region.
about them pulling out?
Well, I don't want to intervene in the American policy.
But I'm asking if you're worried about it.
One should be worried always, but we should protect ourselves by ourselves. In terms of our national security, we are not expecting anyone else to protect us. We need sometimes political help, diplomatic help, support from our friends, but we are not expecting to be protected by other armies.
Speaking of Ambassador Friedman, the dedication ceremony of the new U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem, it was seen as very partisan. There were no Democrats there from the United States. And liberal Jews are saying that this is another example of how the Likud government is putting a wedge between liberal Jews.
Totally incorrect.
You think they're wrong? Their analysis is wrong?
No doubt they are wrong, because that was a ceremony in an American embassy.
Yes.
The one that decide who will be invited to this ceremony are not Israelis. Israelis are not deciding for the Americans.
You see no
connection? It's a ceremony that I guess American administration is deciding who to invite. So I don't want to blame the Israeli...
But Gideon, please, you don't see any connection between the very close connection that Benjamin Netanyahu has with Donald Trump, how he has bet on the GOP and the Republicans, how a lot of liberal Jews, Democrat Jews, feel that they have problems with this government?
Totally different issues. First of all, Netanyahu didn't intervene in the elections between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. No one can say that. Secondly, let's put aside the disagreements from certain parts of American Jewry with the Israeli policy. We have some disagreements. We are not hiding it. I agree we should invest more in a dialogue with all parts of American Jewry.
Why is support for Israel among Republicans, it's nearly 3 times higher than Democrats? In the last Pew study that was done here, we're putting it up on screen, it was done on January. Israel is losing Democrat Jews.
First of all, if you will make similar polls, yes, I know the results. If you will make similar polls in European countries and compare right-wing and left-wing citizens in terms of support in Israel, you will find a certain coordination between more support in the right and less support in the left wing. It's a phenomenon. I don't say we should leave this idea of bipartisan support in America. It is very important. It is important for us to invest in creating more support among democratic public opinion. But
is the government doing enough to do that?
To be totally accurate, in terms of the left wing in the Democratic Party, they have problem with Israel policies. And if we will try to accommodate with their advice, we will risk our national security. So there is certain things we can do and certain things we shouldn't do.
Well, one of the things that liberal Jews are worried about in regard to internal Israeli policies that we just mentioned are asylum seekers here in Israel. It's an issue that you've been very vocal about. You know, the state almost had a deal with the United Nations for resettling.
Not only I've been vocal about, I was interior minister and I was responsible.
About it.
I was responsible for the policy in that.
I thank you for that addition, sir. The state almost had a deal with the United Nations to resettle 16,000 of the asylum seekers in Israel permanently, and 16,000 that the UN would put in other places in the West.
It's not the accurate numbers. It's correct that the numbers was 16,000 with the UN, but those who left was much more than 60,000.
Well, there were reports that they're going to renegotiate.
The vast majority of the illegal infiltrators. I thought it is a mistake to give legal status in Israel to those who enter illegally to Israel and to create legally a new community, a minor community in Israel. I think it was a mistake, and I am happy that finally the Prime Minister reversed that decision.
But what's wrong with just taking 16,000 people and resettling them? I mean, it's not.
I don't have a problem with the first part. I have a problem with the second part.
Yes.
To give legal status in Israel to the vast majority of the illegal infiltrators. That this is.
Aren't they also asylum seekers though? Because Israel didn't really check if they were asylum seekers.
No. First of all.
20 seconds. We have.
Yes, we are not talking about asylum seekers. We should check any asylum seekers request. We are talking about those who we found that they are illegal immigrant workers.